Hola, buenas tardes. Hoy comenzamos con el día de la fecha. Tenemos el placer de presentar a Maristella Berta, que nos visita desde Italia. Maristella vino en julio para un curso que se llevó a cabo durante este año, justamente a mitad de julio para doctorando. Y por suerte se queda varios días y amablemente se aceptó dar un coloquio en este contexto. Ella tiene un máster en Environmental Physics y un doctorado en Environmental and Industrial Fluid Mechanics en una de la Universidad de Torino y en otra de la Universidad de Trieste. Su principal interés es el estudio de la dinámica de la circulación en 3D en el océano, utilizando diferentes observaciones in situ, modelado y para la parte de datos observacionales utiliza boyas lagrangianas que y piensan estrategias para poder hacer la mejor experimento, y nos va a contar un poco sobre su trabajo.
Muchas gracias, Laura. Muchas gracias. Perdón, sí, I switch to English, it's better. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Maristella Berta. Thank you very much all for being here today. And so today I will present some of the work we've been developing in these years on multi-platform observation of mesoscale and submesoscale dynamics in the ocean. Some of you that have been at the submesoscale school in July will recognize some of the concepts that I will introduce today. And so I want also to mention that all the work that I will present is part of a collaboration at international levels within different projects, transnational. That means, for example, between Italy and France, because we are facing like the same sea, and so we are both interested to collaborate and join our efforts to investigate the Mediterranean Sea that affects our activities along the coast. We have also collaboration at European level, like in the Jericho S3 project, that is more based on the investigation of integration of coastal observatories to improve the knowledge of the dynamic of the Mediterranean Sea. And we'll be participating as well in project with the United States, like the CARTE project. This was a quite long project, approximately 9 years, and we've been investigating dispersal of pollutants in the Gulf of Mexico. And the last is the Calypso project, always with the United States, that is based in the Mediterranean Sea and investigates the mesoscale and submesoscale dynamics and the vertical pattern that develop from these structures through multi-platform observation. First of all, I will introduce for the ones that have not seen this yet, but I think it's worth it, our institute. So the Consiglio Nazionale delle Ricerche, Istituto di Scienze Marine, has several labs all over Italy. Our headquarters is in Venice. And the lab where I work is in Lerici, so in the northwestern part of the Mediterranean Sea. Here you see in detail where is located the institute, in the Gulf of La Spezia. And this is the view of our institute. And here you have the dam of the La Spezia Gulf. And so we have an incredible landscape from the office. Please visit us. Our institute investigates very different fields of the ocean and sea dynamics from the physical point of view, biological, chemical, geophysics as well, and paleoceanography. And the activities are not just motivated by the knowledge of the dynamic itself, but also to develop services like a forecast system or develop observational infrastructures all over Italy, and also to disseminate knowledge on the oceanography to the general audience or specific for scholars, for example. And my interests in particular are mainly devoted to the collection of in situ marine data by participating or coordinating Lagrangian or multi-platform experiments in the Mediterranean or collaborating with other partners in other basins. After we collect all these observations, we are interested to reconstruct the dynamics of the ocean in 3D and in time in order to understand how the different mechanisms interact within each other at the physics level. We also develop metrics and techniques to investigate the mesoscale and the submesoscale dynamics through targeted Lagrangian observation that we combine with the Eulerian observation or with the modeled data as well. So in the latest year, we've seen a very fast development of multi-platform ocean observatories. And so the aim is to combine all this information that we get to describe the ocean dynamics. And once we have this combined information, it's very important to reconstruct and understand what is the 4D dynamics of the ocean. The multi-platform observation has also another interesting aspect, that is the multidisciplinary aspect, in the sense that we not only have physics, information on the physical properties of the ocean, but we can get also chemical and biological properties of the ocean, and we can investigate biophysical mechanisms. In fact, mesoscale and submesoscale features are known to play an important role in the surface dispersion of tracers, such as pollutants or biological particles. And they are also very important in the exchange in the vertical, so in the different layers of the ocean. And so this in turn affects ecosystems and the interaction between different ecosystems that are spread in a basin. So the multi-platform approach is important both for real-time monitoring and management, such as in case of oil spill or search and rescue activity, and also for the maritime spatial planning in terms of management of human activities, but as well to preserve our environment. So we also develop methodologies to understand the dynamics of the ocean. And for that, we need a very targeted observation that we can also combine with the model output and obtain direct information on the mesoscale and submesoscale activity and the transport related to these dynamics. So the challenge, one of the challenges that we have when we investigate the ocean dynamics is that we have very different processes acting at the same time, but that are variable over very different scales. So in this scheme on the right, we see some example of the processes that occur in the ocean, and we go from very small scale and short times, like for internal waves, and we go to very spatial, very large spatial scale and long term variability, like a climatic scale. And in the red circle, I approximately indicate the scales that we are going to talk today, that is mesoscale and submesoscale. And in order to focus specifically on this scale, it's very useful to combine different observation, independent and complementary, so that we can so that we can have both physical and biological variables. For example, we can have a larger range of spatiotemporal coverage, and we can also monitor very different processes that act at the same time. Just to give an idea of what we mean when we talk about mesoscale and submesoscale in the ocean, I put some pictures to do some similarities between the atmospheric and the ocean domain. So on the left side, we have what we generally identify as synoptic dynamics and mesoscale in the atmosphere, such as high and low pressure system or frontal systems that affects us. And in the ocean, on the other hand, we generally identify as mesoscale gyres and eddy basin scales. And so we generally refer to spatial scales from 10 to 100 kilometers and variability over days and weeks. On the other hand, for the submesoscale, in the atmosphere, we would refer to much smaller scale and fast variability processes, such as tornadoes or local storms. And the correspondence in the ocean could be, for example, local eddies or fronts. And in this picture, for example, on the left, we have a satellite image of the oil spill of the BP water horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. And we see all these swirls that are developing at the surface that are driven by submesoscale. And on the right, we have a section that shows the subduction of chlorophyll from the surface to deeper layers. And this is likely due to a submesoscale front that drives water to subduct to deeper layers. So some important open research topics on mesoscale and submesoscale. First of all is the description of these processes in space and time. And what is the influence of these processes, for example, in terms of dispersion of pollutants or of biological particles, as well as microplastic, for example. And then we also focus on investigating what are the effects of the air-sea interaction on the evolution of the submesoscales. The strategy to look at submesoscale is, first of all, based on multi-platform experiments that involve many different observational platforms, such as drifters, glider and CTD that are in situ measurements. And then we also refer to remote observations, such as from HF radar or satellite. And in order to be able to resolve the submesoscale and also to be able to validate models that investigate and reproduce the dynamics of the ocean. We also rely on open data set, for example, Lagrangian or Eulerian collected all over the basins. And we also launch drifter and floats in targeted experiments to be able to focus on specific features that we are interested in. With the collected data, we develop metrics that helps us to describe in quantitative terms the properties of the submesoscales. And we also develop techniques to try to merge all these observations. In the end, models also help us to interpret the results that we find, and in order to improve our knowledge of the dynamic of the ocean. So the ongoing studies that we've been working on are based on the on the observation, since in the latest year, many modeling investigation and studies have been done on the submesoscale, but monitoring submesoscale in situ is still a challenge because of the short scale and short time variability of these features. And some of the questions we've been addressing, and we are still addressing, are what could be effective strategies to merge and combine independent and complementary sea observation from in situ and remote platforms. And in terms of the description of the variability of the submesoscale and mesoscale properties, we also focus on the variability in terms of seasonal and depth. And we also investigated what could be the effect of air-sea interaction over the variability of submesoscale, both in terms of winds and also in terms of shortwave radiation, so heat fluxes. I will first address the first point on the combination of multi-platform observatories. So every platform has some peculiarity and compensate and complement the peculiarity of other observatories. So if we can refer as an example to some remote observations such as the HF radar that measure the surface currents at a very high resolution. The typical range can be a few kilometers of range coverage with a resolution of a few hundred meters for a velocity grid. And we can go up to a few kilometer resolution of the grid and a range of 50 kilometers from the coast. The counterback of HF radar is that they are very prone to meteorological extreme events. And so the spatial and temporal distribution of this data is not evenly distributed. On the other hand, satellite altimetry provides us regular global coverage at larger scale than HF radar. The counterback is that we only resolve the geostrophic component of the currents, while the HF radar can see all the components that are present in the velocity field. In situ measurements, on the other hand, can help us to resolve what happens in the vertical, so in the water column. And the counterback of this is that we generally, for an in situ activity, is needed a very accurate plan and target. And also to consider that generally we have limited time at sea that is also affected by meteo marine conditions. And so like the combination of all these in the end can give us a complete description of the dynamics. And so numerical models can help to interpret all the combination of the platforms. So we get data in 3D and the variability in time as well. We can use models also for specific processes studies. And on the other hand, numerical models need very much observation for validation and for parameterization and to be initialized for a proper simulation. So, as I've said, the combination of all these platforms plays an important role in monitoring and managing the coastal environment as in case of emergencies at sea or oil spill, but also provides information on the dispersion of pollutants, such as chemical or microplastic. And this multidisciplinary approach also help us to resolve what is the biophysical interaction and to preserve and the marine environment and the ecosystem. Generally, in a multi-platform experiments, we initially benefit and rely on remote observation and of atmosphere and the ocean dynamics of the area we want to target. And this information provides guidance to plan the activity and to plan the in situ sampling that we do with Lagrangian and Eulerian measurements. And generally, during the experiment itself, we start processing all these data, remote and in situ, in order to have a better idea of the target and focus on a very specific area to resolve the process that we are interested in. Generally, given the variability of the mesoscale and the submesoscale features, in a typical sea campaign of 3-4 weeks, we change the target like every week or so. Some example of the investigated platform combination that we've been working on in the latest year are, as I've said, remote observation from airborne SST measurements, satellite, modeled field or HF radar field that provided guidance for in situ measurements, CTD, drifter deployments, and all other type of observation at sea. And one of the results we got, for example, was the improvement of the dispersion prediction starting from Eulerian fields. In this panel on the right, we see an example of Eulerian field from an HF radar. And in pink and in black, we see the observed trajectories with drifter and the simulated trajectories that have been corrected by adding the information of other drifters that have been deployed in the same area. And in this way, we improved the estimates of the dispersion. Other data blending feasibility studies are, for example, the combination of remote observation such as HF radar with glider transects within the HF radar itself, or with the mooring measurements placed inside the HF radar. One example was based in the Ligurian Sea in order to study the response of the northern current, that is the main current flowing along the coast of the northwestern Mediterranean Sea, to typical Mistral wind episodes. And the other example is based in the Bay of Biscay, where we compare different blending methods in order to explore what was the best approach to combine HF radar and mooring data. One of the last experiments we've done locally is the AMBO experiment, that is autonomous multi-platform biophysical observation. So in this case, we also have the biogeochemical component, and we were guided by satellite observation to identify interesting recirculation and submesoscale features in the target area. And then we combine, and we are still working on it, the HF radar field at the surface, so the surface currents, with glider transects inside the HF radar field. And we also had drifter deployments inside the same HF radar field and other in situ observation to calibrate and validate the glider observation, especially the biogeochemical ones. Now I will switch to the part of describing the investigation of the mesoscale and submesoscale properties. So we will see variability at different levels. We start from seasonal and depth dependence, and then we will go more in detail to variability related to air-sea interaction. First of all, I will introduce the methodology one of the methodology we've been using lately to quantify the properties of mesoscale and submesoscale, that is based on drifter triplets. So if you imagine a drifter deployments of several buoys, then based on their advection, you can imagine that you can draw some triangles connecting three drifters that are nearby to each other. And so this triangle encloses a patch area of the sea, and we quantify the properties of this patch of sea that is enclosed within the triangle defined by three drifters. As we see in the figure here, this is the definition of three triangles as an example of different size and different shapes. And a few hours later, we see that the same triplet has evolved in shape. And this is an indication and can be quantified in terms of divergence, vorticity, and strain to describe what processes have caused the deformation of this patch of the ocean at the surface. So generally, we also normalize these properties by the local Coriolis parameter, and this gives us an idea of the presence of geostrophic or ageostrophic regime, and of mesoscale and submesoscale features. Yes. Okay. Yes, this technique is based on a paper initially published by Molinari and Kirwan in '75. And yes, we've been developing this technique more and more to characterize the submesoscales. Yes. This is a very recent example that we've been working on with Laura, Martin, and all the group. It is based on the quantification of kinematic properties from SBP drifter that are based at 15-meter depth that were deployed along the Malvinas Current. And we characterize the flow kinematic properties, divergence, vorticity, and strain, considering triplets at scales between 10 and 40 kilometers. And here I show just two examples of what could be the characterization of two very different flows and patterns. At the top, we have an eddy, a small mesoscale cyclone, and we see from the diagram on the right that negative vorticity prevails over strain. So in this graph here, we have vorticity on the x-axis, strain on the y-axis, and the color is divergence. While in the example at the bottom of the slide, we characterize the jet within the Malvinas Current, and we see that strain dominates. In fact, the pattern is more centered inside these dashed lines. So if we imagine to cluster all these individual values of kinematic properties that we've got from the analysis, we can try to see what is the scale dependence of these properties. This example is based on a Gulf of Mexico drifter deployment, and we have both summer and winter deployment. The winter one are the red and the green one, while the summer one are the blue and the black. And we can see that in general, the value of the kinematic properties decrease at increasing scales in both seasons. And the kinematic properties value are consistently higher in winter than in summer. The LDA, that is the red series here, has much higher values in vorticity than the other deployment for the same season, for winter, because it was deployed specifically in a cyclonic eddy, and this explains why the vorticity is much higher than the other deployment in the same season. And we also define with a black dashed line this threshold here at 1 that identifies the scale at which submesoscale is dominant, because below this line we have values smaller than f, while well above this line we have values much larger than f. This is another example of the kinematic properties variability based on an experiment in the Mediterranean Sea. In this case, we not only rely on surface drifter, so within the first meter, but we also have co-located observation of drifter at 15-meter depth. And so in this case, we can resolve both the scale variability, as we see the size of the triplet in the x-axis, but with the blue, we indicate the observation at the very surface, and with the green, we indicate the measurements at 15 meters. And so generally, we see that kinematic properties value are higher at the surface than at 15 meters, that are also triggered by RC interaction. And we see some variability in the vorticity, as we also commented in a previous slide, that is generally related to specific submesoscale features that are vorticity dominated. Now we switch to the wind effect on the submesoscale variability. This first example is based on kinematic properties estimated in a Eulerian way in a HF radar velocity field. On the right, we have the images and the current speed and the kinematic properties estimates before a specific wind event, a very extreme wind event that occurred in October 2018. And on the right, we have the same property estimated after the wind event. In the top panels, we have the current speed, and so we can see the effect of wind accelerating the surface currents in the coverage of the HF radar. In the bottom panel, we have the correspondent estimates, but for divergence before and after the wind event. As we can see, we have an intensification of the kinematic properties of divergence, but we also observe from the current vectors that the initial pattern of submesoscale that was present at the surface has now been flattened. So the increasing kinematic properties is not related to enhanced submesoscale property of what we had before the wind event, but the velocity field is accelerated and has a totally different pattern from what we had before. We have here the same estimate before and after the wind event for the vorticity. And as in the previous case, we see that it increased during the storm. And we have values that reach and exceed 1, that means that are well over F. So we are in a submesoscale regime. And we see these blue and yellow bands that are extreme values of the kinematic properties. And we see that the submesoscale field that was present is not visible anymore during the wind. Averaging the information we have from this map in a time series, we see here on the top the wind time series, and so we see the peak of the extreme wind event here. And in the following panels, we have the quantification of the kinematic properties divergence vorticity, and here is current velocity, the pink one. And we can see the reaction and the interaction of the sea surface to the wind event. We have a gap in the data here because it's due to a power outage to the HF radar system due to a fallen tree because of the storm. And but at the time of the peak of the wind event, we got measurements, and we can see that the velocity increased up to 4 times with respect to the velocity we had before the extreme wind event. And also the mesoscale properties increase by a factor 2. Another aspect that we investigated in terms of air-sea interaction and wind effects on submesoscale variability is the near inertial oscillation signature. And so it investigates what happens to the submesoscale after the wind is gone, and we are left with the near inertial oscillation. So we analyze the drifters after a wind event that is here. So we have this wind peak, and we focus on this time period. We have collocated and synoptic coverage of drifter at the surface, this panel, and at 15 meters, this panel. The color here indicates time, and so we can see they are very simultaneous position at the same time. And on the right, we estimate divergence based on the drifter triplets at the surface and at 15 meters in the right panels here. The colored dots are the same quantities estimated for some ADCP transects that were available during the experiment. Then we've seen this oscillation in the range of a day. And so we started associating this pattern to near inertial oscillation. And we compared this output with a modeled field. And the output is here visible on the right. And we see that the divergence oscillation in the model are also consistent with the near inertial oscillation observed with drifters. So we associate this pattern to inertial oscillation. From the same measurements, since we have divergence at 2 layers, we can estimate vertical velocity. That is a very challenging quantity to be measured in situ. Given the small magnitude that is comparable to most of the uncertainty of the instruments we have available now. And so we used collocated in time and space drifter observation and divergence estimates at 2-layer depth, and we estimated the vertical velocity through the continuity equation. And so in this case, for example, we see the red color that indicates divergence, and the blue color indicate convergence. And in this case, we can see that the pattern of divergence and convergence is very coherent between the 2 layers. And we expect that where we have convergence at the 2 layers, we expect to have some downwelling. And through the continuity equation, we quantified and estimated the magnitude of the vertical velocity that is represented in this panel on the right. So we see that we start with the positive vertical velocity associated with divergence, the red part. And then in the part of the trajectories where we see convergence, we see negative vertical velocity up to a magnitude of approximately 80 meters per day. The last effect I will discuss today is the effect of shortwave radiation on the submesoscale variability. So we are going at smaller and smaller scales, and now we focus on a daily cycle. These observations are based in the Gulf of Mexico. During an experiment in 2016, we released a very large quantity of drifter, 1,000 biodegradable drifter, and we selected very small scale triplets of 1 kilometer size in the month of February, so also related to some wind events that we will see. And the results were binned per hour to reconstruct the cycle of the kinematic properties for each hour of the day. And since we had wind effects, we clusterized the results according to the wind speed magnitude, and we compared the kinematic properties variability during the day according to the different wind conditions. And this is what we got in, like, to recap all the investigation on the wind effect and the diurnal cycle. On the left, we have the wind time series, and we see that we reach very high wind speed up to 16 meters per second. And we define a threshold after doing many sensitivity tests of 7 meters per second. And so we clusterized the kinematic properties estimates that we observed during wind condition above this threshold and below this threshold. And we can see the difference of the evolution during the day of each kinematic properties, divergence, vorticity, and strain. And we see that when the wind conditions are above this threshold, the diurnal signal is not visible, and we have a flattened cycle during the day. But as soon as the wind effect is reduced, the daily cycle of the kinematic properties starts appearing in all properties, and we have the peak centered around 2-3 p.m. Now, it's interesting to compare this observation with some models that can help us to explain why we have the peak of the kinematic properties during the time of the day where we have the highest stratification, and we would expect, on the other hand, reduced mixing and reduced value of the kinematic properties. And so with a paper by Dajair in 2017, that noted the same behavior in the Southern California bight, and noted some strong secondary circulation at times of weak vertical mixing, so in 2-3 p.m. mid-early afternoon. And to account for this effect, in a following paper, they extended the 2D thermal wind equation to include the time evolution of buoyancy by eddy diffusion and advection. And I won't go through all the equations, but we will find the references at the end of the presentation. And this new system of equation explain very well why we have the peak of the kinematic properties and an intensification of submesoscale during the day at the time where we have highest daily stratification of the surface layer. These are some picture from the paper, from the modeling paper. And so in the top panel, we have in green the shortwave radiation that we see that is in phase with the peak of the kinematic properties. And in the central panel, we have the diurnal cycle in the green line that modulates the mixed layer depth, that is the cyan one. So we have a shallowest mixed layer with the highest peak of the shortwave radiation. And at the bottom panel here, we see the time evolution of the kinematic properties in black, red, and blue. that respond to the changes in the vertical mixing, that is the magenta line here, as an effect of this secondary submesoscale circulation. We've also investigated the effect of wind on the diurnal cycle by applying some wind peak and wind event at different time of the day. And the panels at the bottom show this effect. So the shaded black and red lines here show the wind peak here that has been applied to estimate all the kinematic properties, divergence, vorticity, and strain. And in a solid line, red and black, we see how this cycle, diurnal cycle, is disrupted when the wind peaks, even if the wind, independently from the time of the day that the wind peaks, can be 9 a.m. or 9 p.m., and the cycle is always disrupted by the wind. So to summarize the results on the ocean submesoscale properties and variability, we can say that the magnitude of the submesoscale properties tends to decrease at larger scales and with depth. We have seasonally higher values in winter, and we've seen that extreme events, extreme wind events tend to flatten the typical submesoscale features that we had before the wind episode. But in general, these winds reinforce current gradients and reinforce the relative properties, but are not associated anymore to this submesoscale pattern. And when wind relaxes, we can see the signature of near inertial oscillation that induce the same oscillation in the submesoscale kinematic properties and some oscillation in the vertical exchange in the surface layer that we've been monitoring, so in between surface and 15 meter. And we've seen also that the daily shortwave radiation influences the submesoscale properties of the surface of the ocean when the wind conditions are weak enough. So our ongoing investigation are always focused on the investigation of submesoscale patterns and the associated vertical transport and the estimate of vertical velocity, and what could be the effect on the transport of and dispersion of particles, such as pollutants or biological particles, and in turn the effect on the ecosystem. And for this, we will keep analyzing some experiments that have been already done in the last years, such as AMBO, Calypso, and BioSWAT, and with the same aim, we will target new submesoscale and mesoscale features, such as the one in the that we are going to target with Martin and Laura, with a project led by Laura Pataswat, and so it's an exciting new collaboration for us. Thank you. And here, the last slide, you have some references in case you need to. Okay.
Gracias, Maristela, muy interesante. Tengo yo algún par de preguntas, pero primero le vamos a dar espacio a la audiencia para que pregunte tanto en castellano o en inglés, y bueno, va a contestar en inglés. Empiezo yo. I want to ask you about the last part of your talk that for me was really new and really interesting. And I was thinking about which kind of wind you observed. Was in situ observation, was for analysis observation, because I am expecting that to see that kind of structure, you need more like also high resolution wind pattern.
Yes, so in the case of the model, it was the same wind that was used to force the model itself, but in the case of the observation, I can find it. this wind time series is taken at a wind station of the NOAA Institute that is based in the Gulf of Mexico. So it was observed with wind time series that was nearby the drifter observation, because in the Gulf of Mexico there are several wind stations placed by NOAA, and so we could pick the wind buoy that was closer to the sampling area of the drifters. Yeah.
I will ask another one. For the case of the diurnal cycle, that of course the short wave radiation will warm the surface.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, for example, if you want to see also to understand the diversion and the vorticity and think about if you have boiling or not boiling, in that case, which kind of drifter you will use apart from the Carter? Because I'm thinking that in general, when we have in situ data, and we want to look at the depth of the mid layer or the thermocline, we remove the first 10 meters because we think this is annual cycle, daily cycle.
Yes.
And in this case, the SBP drifter, you will see the velocity at 50 meters.
Yes. Yeah, so the analysis here is based just on surface drifters. And it's very interesting thinking what we could have seen with SBP that were not available at the time, if this signal is dumped through the layers, that I would expect so, and if this is still visible at 15 meters, this is very interesting, and I don't know. But I expect as reasonably that this effect is dumped going deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. But actually, I would have no idea on the magnitude of this cycle at that depth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe we can comment something based on the mixed layer depth that we can see in the model, the evolution.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think we start from 60 meters and we are here at 35. So probably we can still see something from the model. So in the observation, we don't have this evidence yet, but very interesting, and I think we should work more on this. And I expect it to be dumped, but not sure about the magnitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maristella, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very nice presentation once again. I have a question, probably something you're working on. About the measurements you did, I think, in years work.
Yeah.
In the Mediterranean. When you compute those patterns of convergence and divergence, did you compare that to other measurements where you have also temperature? I mean, do you see a signal of the convergence of the divergence in other measurements?
In this, you're referring to this case? Okay, because I wasn't sure. Yes, because we see the same pattern, for example, with the ADCP observation that were in the two CTD transects that have been taken crossing the front. Because here drifters are moving from the northeast to the southwest along this front. And after deploying the drifter here in the northern corner, we kept monitoring the same feature while drifters were following the feature. We kept monitoring it, crossing it several times with other observation like ADCP and other CTD cast, and we see signature of intrusion and subduction from the surface to deeper layers.
But I mean, do you expect something like we did you measure something like we expect when you have divergence, warmer or colder water, according you have a convergence of divergence, or signal in the chlorophyll A that is in agreement with the convergence of divergence pattern?
So we found the closest match with the ADCP measurements on the velocity and on the divergence and convergence pattern. Yes. Yes. Let's say. Yes.
In the last, the last slide,
See.
the one Laura asked about, the last one.
No, maybe this one, because the last
The
one.
last one, la última.
The daily cycle.
Yeah.
Before this, no, sorry, before the summary, the ones with
Before this. Okay.
the modeling, that one.
I go back to the summary.
That one, that one.
Ah, the summary. Ah, okay.
Sorry, no,
I should.
sorry, I said the last one, it wasn't the last one.
Ah, okay. No,
Here in the modeling results.
sorry. There is a
Modeling
delay.
results. I am sorry.
Okay. No, there is a delay.
That
So
one.
yes.
Have you any evidence, any biochemical evidences of this pattern?
No, we didn't match with that. Yes. Yes, most of the experiment in the Gulf of Mexico was mostly on physical variables, and we don't have any evidence. And also from satellite, it would be, I think, kind of difficult to match, because the data set over which this statistic is based on the whole month of February of drifters that are sparse and advected in the Gulf of Mexico. So it would be hard to associate to a specific feature with a chlorophyll peak, because the evidence of this diurnal cycle is made from putting together like individual samples that we got all over the Gulf of Mexico. But yes, all the questions, like especially the last one, make me think that we have another interesting point to address, that yeah, we kind of always and mostly focus on the physical aspects, but it's very interesting as well to think about the impact. I think mainly is because our background is mostly on physics, and I think it would be good if we think about this together afterwards, maybe for other experiments, because we need some background on other and expertise on the biophysical aspects to be able to match all these.
That diurnal cycle is very interesting for
Yes.
phytoplankton cells,
Yes.
I think. So, I think that would be very interesting to see how they react
Yes. Yeah.
to that kind of.
Yeah. I'm thinking to the possible data set that we've collected so far, which one could be the most proper to investigate these biophysical aspects?
Satellite data. because
Satellite data.
You have one,
Yes.
one image a day. It's,
Yes.
You cannot resolve, I think, that diurnal cycle, because I mean, what happens to them when they get in
Yes.
that
Yes. Yes. And
that dynamics.
yeah, for example, in BioSWOT, based in the Mediterranean, where we had both drifter and very targeted biophysical measurements, maybe we can try to think to repeat this analysis and
Yes, because what you
Yeah.
showed is a model.
this one is observation.
the
one
results from the
the one is a model. Yeah.
So you can try to that one.
Yeah.
Try to fit that one with the data, the Institute biochemical data that you have in Italy.
Thank you. Interesting.
I would like to see those.
I will add more lines to this summary.
We can go all with you to analyze the data.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because adding up what Silvia just said is that it will be, I think, will be relevant to see. So if you can go on the previous slide.
Previous?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another with the wind perturbation. So you have some stable cycles and you have the perturbation,
Yes.
and then again it seems to return to that
The-
cycle again.
Yes.
That couple cycle. So that will be, I think, I don't know what she was saying is that how long will it take to return to the biological cycles or the biochemical cycles to return if it's in the same pace as the.
Okay. If
as
it's synchronized or not.
If it's the physical, if it's,
Okay.
so if it's or you are just jumping to different equilibriums.
I see.
That will be within the framework of disturbance in ecology. So this is, you have a disturbance, how long will it take? And if it returns to the same stable station or it goes to another equilibrium,
Thank you.
it will be relevant.
Thank you very much. I will write down all these comments as soon as we. Yeah. Thank you.
¿Alguna pregunta? Te agradecemos de vuelta por la charla.
Thank you very much.
Nos vemos en 15 días que tenemos coloquio de Juan Cruz Carvajal. Así que anótenlo.